Be honest with me here for a second. How many of you have heard somebody talking about the neutral and had no idea what they were talking about? Or how many of you have talked about the neutral yourself while still having no idea what you're talking about? Don't worry, it happens to all of us at one point or another, and today we're going to look to push your understanding of the quote-unquote neutral game to the next level. But first, we need to answer a question. What even is neutral game? In the game Smash, when you're hitting your opponent, taking stage control, and applying pressure, this is what we generally refer to as the advantage state. Reverse those same conditions and we tend to refer to that as the disadvantage state. So if you're not in advantage or disadvantage state, then what does that leave? Well, it leaves us in the middle, the neutral game. Neutral is the middle ground, the tug of war, the space in between. Examples of phrases referring to tools and strategies used in neutral will most likely ring a bell in your head. Things like spacing, baiting, reads, and even terms like mashing and camping are just describing the pace and approach a player takes to their neutral. Whether you consciously realize it or not, you probably have crafted your gameplay around many of its core foundations, or what we tend to refer to largely as fundamentals. See, the neutral game isn't merely a Smash Bros. Or fighting game specific concept. In fact, a quote-unquote neutral game can be found almost everywhere you look. What happens when a quarterback receives a snap from a center? Or when a point guard in basketball is faced up to a defender in isolation? Well, as any high-level competitor will tell you, the big play,
Rodgers on the fake, looking, pumping, Rodgers running, and he's in! Touchdown, Green!
the winning score,
Irving and Curry, one-on-one, Irving puts it up, it's good!
Kyrie Irving from downtown!
or last stock can't be made or taken without a laser-focused attention to detail on that space and time between. This video is not about a one-size-fits-all strategy to win neutral. Such a thing can never really exist in Smash or any competitive game worth its salt. Instead, today I'll be giving you my 5 most useful tips to improve your neutral and get into your advantage state and your opponent's head more often and more effectively than ever before. If all this sounds exciting, then let's do it.
Everyone was like, oh, Ken just figured out this stuff, and like now he's gonna beat PC Chris every time. So like everybody knew about it, so I needed to figure out, something to do about that. Trying to adjust mid-match, that seemed to be my weakness. Like if there were certain players that just knew my style more. Like the term I like to use is called like hot cold. Sometimes run up and don't do anything, see what he does. But at the same time, sometimes I would just approach him. So like I was just trying to mix things up just so he couldn't always just be throwing out counter, and if he did, he'd get punished for it, and at least start to think about doing it.
What you just watched was one of my favorite clips from the legendary Smash Bros. Documentary series featuring PC Chris talking about the concept of playing a hot and cold neutral. The idea is basic enough. Instead of only trying to play to your natural strength in neutral, whether that's aggression or defense, you implement a mixture of both playstyles to make it much harder for your opponent to adapt and get comfortable with your pacing and options. Versus more experienced players, being predictable will have a hopeful start to a game turn into a 6 stock really quickly. I often experience that playing versus somebody for the first time can be the most difficult if you're not adapting your playstyle. The better the player, the more they learn from every play you make in neutral. This is why the hot and cold neutral is a great fundamental principle to learn early and follow often in competitive Smash. I highly recommend you take a minute to figure out what your natural playstyle is while analyzing your gameplay. This shouldn't be too difficult for most. You probably feel like more comfortable either being aggressive and applying pressure, or maybe you're a little more conservative, you find yourself playing like in the corner more, a little more defensive. You also might feel that you fall somewhere in the middle, and I do think it's definitely possible. I just recommend maybe thinking about the playstyle that really bothers you the most, frustrates you to play against, and typically that's usually where you're most weak in your own gameplay. When you have the ability to play neutral in many different ways, you open up your strengths by keeping your opponent guessing and never being too predictable. A great example is a ball handler who can use the left and right hand to create opportunities in a one-on-one situation.
Can you shoot? Can you go right? Can you go left? If you can't shoot, then it doesn't matter if you can go right and left. The defensive game plan is a simple one.
Have you ever been in an important match that you cared about a lot, playing well, things going according to plan, and then, all of a sudden, Whether it's because you're down a stock, have a lead, it's game 5, etc., choking happens to everyone. Personally, I have always had issues with losing focus during a match or choking away situations due to nerves and indecision just clouding my judgment. My good friend and occasional coach Hakaru and I were discussing this issue a lot around a year ago, and he was able to explain to me the concept of having a simple and effective game plan to rely on. Although very basic on the surface, it was a breakthrough idea for me. A consistent and reliable game plan for me to build off of was exactly what I needed to take my game to the next level. For simplicity's sake, we'll break game plans into 2 categories for now. 1, general game plan, your intrinsic take to the game that you bring with you to every set. And 2, matchup specific game plans. And this is something that we're going to cover more in a different video, but it's still worth mentioning and touching on briefly here. Your general game plan is a specific small set of principles that you adhere to regardless of opponent and matchup. This depends heavily on your natural strengths and your character strengths, but for now, here's a good example of building a personal game plan. Let's say for this example that I main Roy. Thinking about when he is at his strongest led me to realizing that cornering my opponents with safe pressure led to more mistakes and early kills. I also noticed that I could ledge trap people for huge percent pretty consistently. Now, what is Roy worse at? Getting outranged, zoned out, and reversaled, aka having an advantage situation turn on you due to overextending. My game plan was pretty clear at that point: get my opponent to the corner and to the ledge as often as possible while not forcing my recovery or wasting my double jump and excessive resources trying to rush my way back to the stage. This game plan plays to my strengths, accommodates for my weaknesses as much as possible, and gives me a simple and consistent vision for every interaction that I need. Of course, you're gonna need to be more dynamic and take risks at times, but for the moment, when the clouds arrive and the choke begins, that simple and effective game plan is your safety blanket of smart and safe play. Matchup game planning is probably what you're a little bit more used to, weighing the pros and cons of your character versus your opponents and learning specific techniques and habits of that opposing character create a level of confidence that can really only come from preparation. You can think of the general game plan as your foundation and the matchup specifics as what you add on and personalize to fit you best for whatever situation you need. When it comes to the topic of spacing and burst range, there's one particular character in Smash history that especially sticks out to me personally. As you most likely know, the term spacing refers to using a move in a way to minimize the risk involved by being as difficult to counterattack after an approach as possible. Sword characters have the most obvious visual indicator of their ability to safely attack from range with disjoints, aka moves that have a hitbox with no hurtbox attached to them. We call this space in which a character chooses to safely apply pressure their burst range. The whole point of disjoints and spacing is to create minimal risk while still being able to gain the reward of winning neutral. It's an essential fundamental to competitive Smash due to the mistakes that tend to come from safe pressure. So how do we deal with this on the defensive side? Well, knowing a character's range in which they can safely apply pressure on you with minimal risk can create an opportunity for you to take advantage of your opponent's own predictability. Versus Bayonetta, I know that this character's burst range offense usually consists of either up B out of shield, side B out of shield, or down tilt. So when I hold shield in this situation in front of him, I decide to not let go of shield and just wait to react to whatever defense option he chooses first. He does up B out of shield, goes off stage, I hold stage control, predict the side B because of the angle of his recovery, and I was able to get the easy kill because of it. This is a good example of a situation of knowing what your opponent is going to do just based off of knowing the options that they have in the first place. The same way we touched on the importance of having a diverse game plan and multiple options, you'll find a lot of players who rely solely upon using that burst range to open up their neutral. Whether you're the one spacing your moves and applying that safe pressure, or you're the one playing around your opponent's burst range, regardless, it's important to have a well-rounded understanding of spacing and the burst range on offense and defense. Little Mac is most likely the least competitively viable character in the entire game. His lack of range, non-grounded options, recovery ability, and plenty more holds him back from being a realistic contender to win any major tournaments. So then, why exactly is he so goddamn frustrating to fight against? While Little Mac is a limited character, there is one aspect of the game that he truly does excel at. To further explain and understand his concept, let's apply it to another real-world situation. Shaquille O'Neal is a 4-time NBA champion, and he's big, slow, and can't shoot. He is also regarded as one of the most dominant and feared players in NBA history. And as I'm sure you could probably guess, It has a lot to do with the fact that he is 7'1", 325 pounds out there on the basketball court. Because of Shaq's dominating size, his lack of skill set and other options of basketball really did not limit his career as much as it would for other players due to his incredible size and the inherent pressure he was able to put on his opponents just by being there. I think the same principle applies to Little Mac and other characters like him. Regardless of the actual match, you will always feel a certain level of pressure against a character that can kill you in scary and unexpected ways. Through his massive shield stun, damage, and knockback on certain moves, he's able to go quite a long way to make up for his incredible lack of options in every other regard. However, Little Mac's shortcomings are a little too steep for even him to be a consistent top-level threat. But what if a character had a lot less of those holes to balance their inherent pressure out? Terry, Ken, and Ryu are the kings of inherent pressure in the meta currently, in my opinion. For lack of a better phrase, these characters live and eat off of scaring the ever-living shit out of you. Players of these characters often make a lot of reads just based off of the fear of their opponent alone. That's the power of inherent pressure. The same philosophy applies to any character's strengths. Youngling strikes fear in his opponents by them knowing that getting hit by one arrow can open up an entire combo string and force them off stage. While this is a great strength, only relying on your inherent pressure has a fatal flaw. What happens when your opponent isn't afraid of you anymore? Through matchups, character knowledge, discipline, and many other fundamental strengths often found in top-level players, inherent pressure can be contained and played around. Just remember, respecting your opponent's neutral and playing safe is not the same as playing afraid. Being consciously aware of this inherent pressure is a huge step towards not losing to the same character for the 5th time in a row and still not understanding why. Finally, let's talk about my personal favorite way to implement a mixture of all of these things, a combination of game knowledge, reads, and intuition that can create amazing plays and mental demons for the unlucky autopiloter that runs into you after this video. The bait and punish game. If you've ever played mindlessly, or another term being autopilot, you know that you are at your most predictable in nearly every situation. When you begin to play neutral more consciously, not only do you not autopilot nearly as much, you're able to bait and punish the hell out of anyone that is. The more effort and time you put into learning and understanding not only the game, but also why people play the game the way they do, the easier it becomes to analyze a situation and make very educated guesses on what's likely to happen next. This is the reason why so many top players are able to land reads on opponents they've never even played before. It's a feel for neutral that comes with experience, time, and conscious effort. There's also players that just have that sixth sense for knowing what their opponent will do. Some are just home run hard reads, and hard reads are great, but a lot of times you also gotta remember that hard reads can require hard risk. Risk in Smash is needed and can pay off in big ways, but generally maintaining a solid risk versus reward ratio in your neutral pays off over the course of long sets versus people who are good or better than you. If you are a tournament player, you will know there are situations when you need to find a way to win neutral or even just secure a needed stock, but nothing's working and the pressure begins to mount rapidly. If two players are equally as good and both play fundamentally solid and safe, then how do they hit each other? How do they kill each other? Well, this is where the fun really starts. For example, let's say your opponent has a full stock lead on you and is close to securing the game. Because of your understanding of choking and implied pressure, you might see that there's actually a very good chance for you to still win a game, even while at a great deficit like this. Remember, your opponent is still under a lot of pressure and can probably be baited easiest in this moment of all. Obviously that isn't a law of Smash, but players generally tend to play a certain way in different situations. Through observing their nervous habits and situational tendencies, you can open up an incredibly effective bait and punish game preying on their desire to get the hell away or desperately kill you. Players who handle this situation well will force you to have this interaction multiple times, and often those games can be decided by who's willing to take either the right risk or who's willing to not give in under the pressure. Hey guys, Colin here. I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who stuck through this entire video. Y'all are absolutely awesome, and I appreciate the support on the YouTube channel so much. I've actually had a ton of fun grinding out videos recently and really testing myself as an editor and stretching myself and trying new things. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and goodbye.